Okay, so now we're back for another Ask GMBN Tech. This is where I get to answer all of your tech-related mailbag questions, or at least hopefully answer them. Don't forget you can send your questions in by commenting just below this video. Please get those things talking. We love to read that sort of stuff. And of course, the email address is on the screen right now. Can't guarantee that all of you are going to get them read out because there's so many of you that participate, but I'll definitely try and make an effort to sort of read them all, and we always try and get back to you. So keep them flooding in. So first up this week is from Osiris the Virus. I like that, nice reference to Con Air there. Ask GMBN Tech, I had a crash and I scratched my stanchion tube. So the stanchion tube on a fork it's the upper leg basically of the fork, and if you scratch that you risk damaging the seals. It's a small scratch, but is there anything I could do besides replacing the stanchions? Well, yeah, you can do a bit of a fix. I mean, the issue with replacing the stanchions is that these are part of the crown and the steerer tube. That's known as a CSU, a crown steerer upper, and that's obviously a very expensive part to replace. Now, if you do scratch these tubes, it will hinder the performance of your suspension fork. Sometimes you can get air loss, sometimes you can damage the seals if, for example, there's like a burr or something that sticks out. So it does depend on the severity of your particular damage, but let's just say for argument's sake you've got a little nick in there and it's just sticking out a bit. There's something that is going to damage that seal. Okay, so it does depend on the severity of it, but a very brief one, because I'm going to pick this up with a full video on how to do this, which I'll be filming next week. What you need to do basically is take that burr off. So you're going to need some fine emery paper, as fine as you can get, because you don't actually want to scratch that stanchion tube any more than you absolutely have to. You need a metal file. Now again, as fine as you can get and as small as you can get. You want some metal polish and some sort of dry degreaser or brake cleaner, isopropyl alcohol, anything that evaporates basically. And the aim of the job is to, using the metal file, is to take that burr off so it can't score or damage your seals. And then using a brake cleaner, get rid of that sort of residue, anything that's on there, and then polish it out with the emery paper and using the metal polish. And hopefully you're going to get this to be smooth enough to pass through your fork seals and that it won't damage them anymore. Next up is a clipless pedal related question from Marius Hilkett. Hi Doddy, my question is, Shimano offers two types of cleats for their clipless pedals, normal and multi-release. What are your experiences? What are the pros use? Okay, so for those of you that don't know, on the screen right now are two cleats. On the left is single release, on the right is multi-release. But the ones on the left, single release, basically they're designed so you can unclip from the pedal either to the far left, which is your natural way, but also to the inside. So they say single release, but actually it's almost a dual release. And some people are put off by the fact that you can only clip out the pedal like that, but actually it's a very natural way of clipping out the pedal. When you have a crash or anything like that, you naturally just pop out the pedals. It's no problem. Now, multi-release, you can clip out to the inside, the outside, and at an angle both inside and outside. So whilst this is good if you're learning to use clipless pedals for the first time, it's also actually quite an unsecure way of riding, because you're riding on uneven ground and you're pedaling, and you can accidentally pop your feet out of the pedals, which kind of goes against the whole principle of having them. And to me, they feel a little bit more like flat pedals than they do, but not actually having the advantages of that. So I would suggest just going for single release cleats in the first instinct, because that is what the majority of all clipless pedals use. Of course, Shimano do have the option of both, but as far as I'm concerned, multi-release cleats, sack them off. Stick to the single release, much better. They're predictable, you know what they're going to do, you know when you're going to clip in or out, and you know where you can clip in and out. So I would stick to that, get used to them. Honestly, it's no concern. And don't forget, on Shimano pedals, you can just back off the tension of the mechanism on the pedal, so you can pop out really easily anyway. And of course, as you get used to them, you can gradually wind on more tension, so you can really maximise on the power you get from the pedals, and you don't have that sort of accidentally popping out sort of moments. Hopefully that helps. Next question is from Hannes. I've just got the new YT Capra and I've got some trouble with the E13 TRS dropper post that came with it. The top bit is moving a little bit to left and right, which is really annoying. Any ideas what it could be? The post itself doesn't move. Okay, so in any telescopic seat post, you've got a key mechanism. So some have 2 keys, some have 3, and I'm sure that some have 4 as well. And what I mean by keys is there will be grooves on the inner tube that slides within the outer tube. So if I just grab this one down here, so there will be some grooves on this inner tube and there will be keys, and I think in RockShox's reverb case they're brass, that sit into those grooves. And obviously in time those brass keys with the seat post going up and down are going to wear and you start developing that waggle. So that does happen on all seat posts, and they are parts that can be replaced in servicing. But what you're talking about with the E13 posts I think is different, because this is a pre-production one that I've had for some time and there is no play whatsoever in the actual post with the keys yet. But something I've had happen is the actual head of the post has come loose, and I think that's what you have. So if you take off the seat post cradle off the top there, the clamp, you'll find underneath there is a 10mm Allen key bolt. And if this is loose, if I just loosen this, that top piece, you might be able to hear that, can move. So I think that's what your problem is. If you get the 10mm Allen key into that, tighten that sufficiently, bingo. So hopefully that will be your problem. 10mm Allen key right in the top there. Another seat post related question, this time from Ian Burke. Hey Doddy, loving the tech show, so I love what you're doing, keep it up, thank you. I'm a tall guy too, plenty of tall guys out there liking this. 6'4", and my Remedy 29er has a reverb dropper post with 125mm of travel. I absolutely love the dropper post, but feel it's not quite tall enough for me. I'm considering a longer travel post, but the upgrade list for this spring seems to be getting longer with all the other items wearing out, shoes, tyres, etc. I'm wondering if you think the upgrade would make a major difference, and if I'm going to notice it. Also, what are your thoughts on some of the lower price point dropper posts like the Brand X, or any other recommendations? Okay, so first up, you've got a dropper post and it works. If your tyres are wearing out, you need to replace those. If other things on your bike are wearing out and they need attention, get that done first, because ultimately that makes a bigger difference to your riding. However, being a tall guy, the longer drop post you can get makes a much bigger difference for you. So being a fellow tall rider, anything now sort of less than 150mm drop, I actually struggle with, because I've got so used to having that longer drop. And the reason it makes such a big difference for us is because we're so much taller. When you're on the bike, as I explained earlier, you have that pendulum effect when you're up high. Now, if you can lower that centre of gravity, it's hard being so tall. The lower you get on the bike, the more stable you're going to feel, especially when you're going through rough terrain or anything that pitches you really steep where you feel like you might go over the bars. I really can't emphasise it enough that for a tall rider, anything north of 150mm makes a significant difference to the way you feel. But if you haven't ridden that, you can just continue as you are. The day that you ride one and then go back to your 125mm post, it will ruin everything for you. So avoid it until you've saved up and got the pennies for it. Next up is a question in relating to brake pads from Mario Tomasi. What's the difference between organic, Kevlar, sintered, metallic brake pads? Okay, so there are various different names out there, but there are essentially just two different types, organic and metal. So metal is sintered. So the metallic brake pads, they've got metal backing on them. Then there's the organic versions, often known as resin as well, like the Shimano case, they call them resin. So they have an organic backing to them. The material itself is held together with resin. So when that stuff gets hot, that's what you smell when you get burning brake pads. Next up is good. This is a bit of a call out. I kind of quite like this when this happens, because although I pay attention to a lot of tech stuff, it's really easy to miss stuff because there's so much that goes on in mountain biking. So this is from Avery Eggert. Hi Doddy, I'm from Louisiana. You were talking about a 29 front and 27.5 rear combo. I've got a Trek 69er. This bike's got loads of grip on the front and it feels super laid back. It does have a very active feel in the back end and accelerates quickly. But the only thing I don't like is I have to treat the wheels differently. So I plough with the front and place and hop with the back. However, it does corner incredibly. On flat concrete, not the same as dirt, I'm sure, but on flat concrete, I can lean the bike to where my foot is literally just about off the ground. Sorry for the essay, but the 69er 96 concept is pretty interesting to ride. I'm definitely going to do that. And although in the last video I did say that I was going to get Neil to do it, now that my Scott's arrived, I'm 100% going to try it. So mine came with the 29-inch wheels to start with, but as you know from the video that Neil did with the 27.5 versus 29, the same bike can accept both sizes of wheels, and you just literally flip a chip on the shock to drop or raise the bottom bracket height. So already I've spotted that Neil's now gone to 29, so his 27.5-inch wheels are just sat in the workshop. So tempted to take those home at the weekend and have a little try myself. I'm going to get used to the bike first, so I do understand how it feels. Then I'll do the same with 27.5, then I'm going to start chopping and changing. So keep an eye out for that. Next up, excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, is from Clipless. Since everyone talks about pedal kickback, why don't downhillers use Freecoasters, or at least parts of the technology, since it would provide benefits of not having pedal kickback plus being able to pedal? So for those of you who don't know, a Freecoaster hub is something that comes from the BMX world predominantly, and it's used in flatland and street riding to disengage the pulls on the bike. So let's just take a step forward and look at a regular mountain bike. So when you're pedaling, the pulls are engaged. So that enables you to push the wheel around with your cranks and the drivetrain. When you stop pedaling, the wheel continues moving and the pulls disengage and enables them to click their way around the free hub body, or the bit where they engage. That is the clicking that you can hear. On these BMX hubs with a Freecoaster, basically you can click it backwards on the crank and it disengages those pulls, enabling you to free coast forwards and backwards. So on a normal mountain bike, if you just rolled the bike backwards, the cranks would go backwards with the wheel because your weight is not going forwards on them to hold them down. So technically, what Clay is saying is if you had a Freecoaster hub on a downhill bike, it would disengage the drivetrain from the suspension, which would make a significant difference. There have been a few downhill racers out there, in particular Aaron Gwynn, who did very well at a particular World Cup when his chain snapped, and he was heard commenting at the finish how good his suspension worked. And basically his suspension worked really well because his drivetrain was completely disconnected. That's not to suggest that the suspension platform he was riding wasn't very good. It's just a case there's always going to be some influence from the drivetrain or the transmission on that. And last up is another question from a tall rider. I'm loving the tall rider questions. Maybe next time we need some short rider questions just to change it around a bit. But anyway, so Jay Almquist, Doddy, loving the show. Here's my question. I'm a tall rider like you at 6'3" and ride a size XL frame. I get pedal strikes from time to time, and I measured my bottom bracket height and figured it's a bit low for my style of riding. The cranks on my bike are 175mm, and I understand it's the right length for my height, but I really want to try 170 or even 165. What do you think? I've got very fixed opinions on this. I'm not interested in cranks shorter than 175. I've tried 170, I've tried 165, I've tried downhill bikes with 165s on. And although it makes perfect sense because of the travel of the bike and the situations where you need to pedal, I actually find it's harder to pedal. And I would rather run a longer crank, pedal harder in the short term that I pedal, and pedal less for other durations than I would have to. But back on a trail bike, I'd rather just learn, I know when I'm going to ground out on a bike. I'd rather just learn that by pedaling and by changing gear and altering my cadence. I can't stand the way that shorter cranks feel, and they also make me feel slightly more upright on a bike. I mean, bearing in mind, talking from 175 to 170, it's only 10mm difference, but it's 10mm more difference that I'm coming up on the bike. The longer the cranks are, the more lower down I am on the bike. And if I can improve that being a tall rider, I'd go for 180 if it wasn't such a ridiculously long length to use on a mountain bike with suspension. Okay, so there's another GMBN Tech Ask Clinic in the bag. Please continue to fire questions in. I love reading them. I love trying to help you as well, and all the social guys here do too. So you can add them in the comments below, the email address that's on the screen right now, and of course you can reach us via Instagram and Facebook too. So for a couple more useful videos, if you want to find out how much difference all that suspension makes when you're out on the trail once you've made those adjustments, click down here. That's a video I shot in Alicante. I'll just take you through some of that stuff like volume adjustment. You can visibly see the difference it makes with the same sort of air pressure when I chuck some spaces in and out of the bike, what it does to your suspension. And of course, if you want to know everything about Di2, the Geek Edition, that is the one with Neil right down here. So make sure you watch that. It's really good, and even if you haven't got electronic gears, it might change your mind on what you thought about them. As always, click on the globe to subscribe. There's brand new content for you every single week, and we're going to be making more and more very soon. Of course, if this video has been helpful for you, give us a thumbs up.